teaching tonight. So The Act of Will is a wonderful and unique book. It's the only book in psychology or psychiatry that I know of that focuses on this unique experience of the human will. And he comes at the book, I'll say, from the base of the pyramid with the experience of the strong will. The strong will is whenever you're faced with things that are tough for you, and you look inside and you say, like Invictus, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to push forward. I'm going to exert myself into the world. Assagioli points out that the strong will is not enough. The strong will can devolve into rigidity on one hand or chaos on the other. So the next chapter of the book, in fact, a few chapters of the book, are about the skillful will. And this idea of the skillful will, ever since I studied the book back in the late 90s, prior to that, I knew I had this idea that the will has to be skillfully exerted into life, but I didn't have the language for it until I read this book. The skillful will watches the dynamics of your own energy. When you wear out, when you're avoiding, when something becomes too tough, when you're able to look at your thoughts, feelings, and emotions and drives, impulses, sensations, and intuitions, and you step above them and say, what's going on inside of me does not lead to my well-being. The question is, can I learn the skill to conquer those parts of us that inevitably rise up but are destructive to us? So a person will say to me, I'm so upset, I'm so distressed about what's happening, and I don't want to feel this way, and I don't know how not to feel this way. One of my questions is, well, would you like to know? Would you like to know how not to feel this way? It's going to take tremendous strong will and the application of skillful will, and skillful will requires the mastery of skills. It doesn't come natural to hardly anybody, to that which is difficult for you. Now, many things come easy to us. Some things are profoundly difficult, and we tend to, as it were, bow out in the face of the strong resistance, either from the world out there or from the resistance within. So his few chapters on the skillful will, including the psychological laws of the skillful will, they're very complex. Sometimes I compare it to a carburetor manual, which is very boring until you need to fix your carburetor, which I actually had to do a couple of times. So I remember reading a carburetor manual and saying, oh my God, this is stupefyingly boring, but I had to rebuild my carburetor. So when I was studying the skillful will, I just remembered, wow, this is so complex. But I think to myself, I really want to master this. Now, toward the middle of the development of the book, he comes to the good will, and now you realize that the strong will and the skillful will should only be exerted in the service of the good. And that's a very difficult topic. Because I want to talk about Assagioli for a little bit more, let me just say three things about the good will. The good will requires that we actually have some theoretical understanding of the good. Many people don't like studying philosophy. They find philosophy stupefyingly boring. They don't understand what it is. I would say if you haven't studied something on the good, the idea of the good, find something accessible and reflect on it and talk about it. Because the idea of the good does not come natural to us. We have our prejudices, we have our biases, we have our opinions, but I believe the word good actually names something metaphysically real. And therefore, what we feel, what we think, what we opine, that's a starting place. But that doesn't define the good. That doesn't mean that what we think, feel, have opinions about is actually good. It's just a starting place. So a person who cares about the good will reflect on the good, will philosophize about the good, will look at themselves and be accountable to themselves when they have a vision for the good and they're not living up to it. So the first thing, if we want to have what he calls the good will, you have to reflect about the will. In my opinion, I feel very strongly about this. Many people have opinions about what's good for everybody, but they've never thought about the good. The second thing, the good requires good reasoning. Now, reasoning is just not thinking. I mean, you can think about anything in any manner that you want. But you go all the way back to the basics of being rational and reasoning, all the way to the Stoic idea of the logos, meaning the spiritual mechanics of the universe as understood by the great Stoic philosophers. So reasoning and rationality just starts with our trying to get through our day, with our values intact, doing things efficiently, all the way up to, you might say, the reasoning power of the laws of the universe, which was a Stoic idea. So for one to, as it were, exert the good, which means go from the strong will to the skillful will to the good will, requires reflection and philosophizing to the degree that one is interested. I hope we all find someone to study. It requires reasoning. And the third thing that, and I see this from all the classes that I teach and my own work with other people, it requires a starting place of great humility and at least somewhere in the process, self-doubt. Now, many people are plagued by self-doubt. So for that person, I say, you need to doubt your self-doubt. The person say, well, when I do this, I'm horrible. I said, who knows if you're horrible? Have you thought about it? You know, when I do this, I feel like I'm such a loser. I said, well, feelings don't create reality. So when we say doubt, it means I have a thought. I think I know what's good for me and other people. I want to doubt myself. Now, I don't say have self-doubt when you've really worked things through. You're like Nelson Mandela. You've committed yourself to a mission in life. But I'm sure Nelson Mandela thought things through every day, and every other leader rooted in goodness does reflect. And I've read the stories of other leaders that didn't reflect, that didn't have self-doubt. They were so sure of themselves that in their quest for the good, they left a lot of havoc around them. And I would say that goes for us as well. Sometimes we think we know it's good for somebody else. We think we know it's good for ourselves. We think we know it's good for a situation. And it'd be very helpful, for one thing, to reflect on what do I mean by the good. That's always in my mind a good thing to do. We have to master skills of reasoning and rationality, and that is not as easy as it thinks, because everybody starts with, of course I reason well. Of course I use my rationality, because we tend to overestimate our capacity for reason and rationality. So it's the same thing with the good. Don't overestimate your ability to be reasonable, to reason and be rational, rooted in the good. It's not a matter of feeling and opinion. It's more than that. And again, one of the, in my mind, inherent qualities of the goodwill is the practice of self-doubt and self-examination. So I just want to say one further thing about Assagioli, which leads me to the idea of the authentic self. And I'll stop here tonight. There's so much I want to say about chapter 10 and everything else, but I want to mention this. Many people confuse the authentic self with subjectivity, asking, well, what do I really feel? What's really happening inside of me? I just want us to pause there. What you really feel might make almost no difference to what must be done. The fact that you really feel it, okay, that's a fact. You really do have feelings. Feelings are facts. But feelings might not be connected to facts. And what you really feel might not what you should feel at the end of the process. Maybe you'll say to yourself, well, I really felt that, but I was in error. Those feelings didn't lead me anywhere good. So I don't want us to ever confuse authenticity with the depths of subjectivity. For me, authenticity includes, you might say, programmed self-doubt, the capacity to reason about yourself, other people, and the situations in which we find ourselves. Human authenticity, it requires the idea, as we'll study, as we've been studying in the Torah portions and tomorrow, there are many layers of the private self. There are many layers of experience. And one does not pick one layer of experience and say, well, that's my authentic self. The authentic self is the one who continues this work of the layers of oneself, the layers of other people, the layers of understanding a situation, the layers of understanding the divine, And in my mind, not dogmatically fixing yourself into one layer, but the authentic self has both the ability to stand way back and try to comprehend the whole thing, which is what Assagioli talks about in the chapter on the universal will. The ability to stand back and contemplate the whole thing on occasion. It's a very deep, profound, transcendent, meditative experience. And at the same time, drill into your own particularity. And as Assagioli says, as many others have said, experience the universal in your particularity. So I want to end with two different metaphors. So here's two teachings that I heard. One teaching is a wave is hurtling toward the beach. And as the wave sees the beach, the wave says, when I hit the beach, I'll be obliterated. So the wave is filled with fear. I'm going to be destroyed when I hit the beach. And then a voice comes through the ocean and says, you're not a wave, you're the ocean. It's a beautiful, consoling thought. Now here's the opposite one. I believe Leonard Cohen taught me this. A raindrop is sliding down a leaf and comes to the end of the leaf and sees the ground below unafraid. The raindrop is sliding down the leaf, comes to the end of the leaf and sees the ground below unafraid. Now, both of these are true. On one hand, I'm not a wave, I'm the ocean. And on the other hand, the experience of the raindrop is real. The question is, are you fearful? The question is, does it rob you of your sense of self? So here's an example where two things that I heard that I really loved, when I contemplated them, they put me into two different meditative and metaphysical places. So I want to talk more about the many levels of Assagioli, the strong will, the skillful will, the good will, love and will, the will toward transcendence and self-realization, and then the universal will, and track the back and forth discursive movement between all of these. And when one stands back and comprehends Assagioli's work as a whole, it's really an astonishing achievement. Not to mention the second half of the book where he gets down to brass tacks and says, let me show you exactly how you do all of this.